Hello, I'm Cornelius Fichtner, the creator of the Project Management Prepcast and the PM Study Coach. In this video, you are going to see an example of one of our live calls from the Study Coach class. In each class, we have over 10 of these weekly calls, and each is about an hour and 15 minutes in duration. In this video, you're going to hear and see some of the highlights from call number 7. It's about half an hour long, and in this way, we can give you an idea of what to expect in an actual live call. And now, here is your coach, Kevin Riley, PMP.
All right, well, it's 6 o'clock, so let's go ahead and get started like good project managers. I want to welcome everyone to call number 7. All right, and just so you know, we are recording, and reasons for viewing by other students, quality control, and also creating our new content. So in today's call, we're going to do a review of human resource management, and we're going to do a preview of communications management. Okay, so what we're going to do here is, again, these are the two topics that we're going to concentrate on mostly. We will be reviewing a lot of different types of questions. For the people who were on the call last week, we really got some good questions throughout the call, and especially at the end of the call where I kind of had an open forum. Just so you know, we went a little over last week, Cornelius, because when the cat's away, the mice did play, and I gave them a little extra airtime with some questions. So some excellent questions came up. So that was very good. So now our agenda, it hasn't changed. It's the same agenda that we'll go through. We'll go through the self-assessment review for 15 minutes. So we'll review the specific questions that we had trouble with. And then Cornelius and I are going to tag team those. He's going to take a couple, and I'm going to take a couple. And what we'll continue to do is, if there aren't specific questions as we go through the session, we'll refer back to that self-assessment and look at the questions that the students had the most trouble with. Okay? Then we'll go over the study material Q&A, our essentials, the all-important essentials, and then open Q&A for open discussion again for 15 minutes, and then review next week's take action. So first of all, what we like to do is a quick PMP exam, quick tip. So Cornelius, you want to take away this one?
Yeah, this is a question that we actually get quite a lot. Emails from either students or from people who are just reading my newsletters or who happen to find me online, just like, you know, I'm preparing my exam application. Do you have a sample for me? You know, I'd like to be able to make it as best as I can and make sure that I don't get audited and make sure I do the right thing. And no, we do not have any examples like that, because each application has to stand on its own merits. It has to be written based on each individual applicant's experience. So if we have 15 students in the class here, you will have 15 completely different applications for your PMP exam. However, if you look into the PM Study Coach, you will see that we do have the experience worksheet, the experience verification worksheet, I believe it is called. That is an Excel-based document, and in there you will see a couple of examples. I think column C, if I'm not totally mistaken, in there, it contains a couple of examples of wordings and phrasings. And the most important thing, I would say, is as you are writing your descriptions, you know, describe what you did in this project. Use PMI terminology, right? It is called a scope document and not the document of the work that has to be performed. No matter what your company calls it, what the consultant who worked with you called it, PMI calls it a scope document. So if you created that in your application, right, created scope document, okay, as part of the text that you're using. Make it as easy as possible for the people on the other hand to understand what's going on and what you actually did in your projects, and use PMI terminology. That will take you a long way towards having an application that doesn't really get flagged. We do not know how PMI actually reviews them, and PMI clearly says audits are performed on a completely random basis. But when you get audited and the terminology used in the application is PMI terminology, you have a much easier time, to pass and to get through that audit quickly. And that's it for this exam quick tip.
Okay, excellent. Very good tip. Thank you for that, Cornelius. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at our self-assessment review. So we're going to review the toughest questions based upon your results. And if we go over to the self-assessment, which is our next slide, we'll see that we have a total of 10 people that actually responded to that. So thank you very much, everybody. I appreciate that. And it looks like there were a couple of questions that a lot of people, or majority of people, had trouble with. Actually, number 1 was 70% people got wrong. So we'll take a look at number 1. We'll also take a look at number 8, where 6 out of 10 got that incorrect. And then there were a couple other ones. We'll take a look at number 9 and then also number 7 after that. Okay. So the first one we're going to take a look at, I'll go ahead and review this question with you, take any questions that you have on the answers, and then Cornelius will do the next one, and we'll kind of go back and forth between the two of us on that. Okay. Okay. So let's bring up that self-assessment, and let's go down to question number 1. All right. So question number 1 states, the staffing management plan does not document which of the following items during the plan human resources process. So this was a bit of a tricky question. The reason being, it really has you think about the time and the process that things are done as far as this staffing management plan and the human resource plan. So the correct answer is B. First of all, confirmed resource calendars. If you look at the question, it says the staffing management plan does not document which of the following items. So resource calendars are created, okay, initially created as part of the staffing management plan in human resource management. But the staffing management plan actually contains proposed calendars that will actually be verified and updated on a regular basis later in the actual process throughout the project. Okay. So does that make sense to everyone? Are there any questions as to why B is the correct answer for this particular question? Okay, pretty straightforward. Not an easy question. Again, you've got that negative that does not, so it really makes you think. Now, this is a very short question, so I think what most students did, I know what I did with the short questions, is equated short with easy. So that is definitely not the case all the time. So you want to make sure that you do read the full question and read the full answers so that you come up with the correct response for each of these. So from there, let's go ahead and move on to the next most difficult, which is number 8. And I'm going to have Cornelius go ahead and take this one over, if you would, please. Exactly.
When you look at this question, it pretty much asks, if you have an organizational chart and in which format can you show this, team member roles and responsibilities? How can you graphically display this? If you look at this, and if you look at the answer, you're going to go, okay, yes, but the others, I have to admit, in this question, the real question is, which is the worst way of displaying roles and responsibility for team members? That's really what this is asking. I would never, in my wildest dreams, use a fishbone diagram to document team member roles and responsibilities. It's possible, right? Very, very far-fetched. It's possible that you could theoretically do it in such a way, but you wouldn't want to do it. Outline charts, RACI charts, yes, okay, I can easily see that, not a problem. But then you have, those are the two that you can take out and say, yeah, B and C, that's possible, but then A and D, they're both extremely unlikely. Now, here the thing is, you have to find the biggest evil right? And you have to understand what they are. If you think of a fishbone diagram kind of is aligned with other lines going away from it. You could imagine yourself using that to show roles and responsibilities. But a tornado diagram, no way you could ever fit roles and responsibilities in there. So here it's really finding the worst possible type of diagram in order to show these team member roles and responsibilities. It is a far-fetched thing to use fishbone diagrams. I completely agree with you on that one. If you say, well, you know, you really shouldn't be doing that, completely agree. But the idea of this question was really to make you think and take an additional step going, okay, which of these two that's left is really the worst of the two, and then select that one. Tricky question, difficult question, mean question, absolutely yes.
Let's talk about essentials for this week coming up. Again, this is stuff that you definitely must know from next week's materials, okay? So what we're going to do here again is give a high-level overview of these essentials, not get into the weeds too much. And then cover those main points so you'll be ready for next week's class, okay? All right, so what are we going to talk about next week? Communications management, all right? So from the first thing we want to talk about, and from Cornelius's PMP Prep Comedy Club, if you can pick up a telephone receiver and you know which end to speak into, then you have pretty much mastered project communications. Project communications is pretty much common sense, even for the PMBOK guide. The things that you have to realize is the majority of the things you already know. There just are specific things you will need to know for the PMBOK guide itself. So this knowledge area really does come naturally to most everyone. In this particular one, if you feel like you have a grasp on this, go ahead and go through it at a little quicker pace than the other ones, and refer back to the topics that you might have trouble with, like earned value or some of the other ones in dealing with scope or time management, okay? So again, this is going to be the easiest one, but having said that, I'm going to pepper that with a little grain of salt. Don't go through this too quickly. Make sure when you do your practice questions on the PM exam simulator that you still do read the full questions and the full answers for this particular knowledge area, okay? Okay. So let's talk about the different types of communication. So what we have on the left is the specific type of communication per the PMBOK guide and the examples of what these communications are. One caveat I want to give to you is this is a good opportunity for me to describe again the difference between the green sky. If PMBOK guide says the sky is green and it's really blue, for the exam it's green. So understand what the PMBOK guide means in terms of these specific communication types. And you'll see what I'm talking about when we go through a couple of examples. So we have a communication type on the left and then a specific example on the right. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and match these from the left to the right. And I want this to be interactive. So when I say what type it is, if someone could shout out what they think is the example on the right, I would appreciate that. So the first one is formal written communication. So what is an example of formal written communication? Anybody?
Status reports, project charter, or project management plan.
Very good. Exactly. These are all formal written types of communication that you want to give to mainly upper management or to see your project team members. What is the actual status of the project? So if you think about the project charter, that is really a formal document that formally initiates the project itself and names the project manager. Excellent. Very good. What about informal written? Anybody?
Emails, memos, online chat.
Good. Okay, so that's good. You didn't fall into the trap there that I did when I was initially studying for the PMP exam. In real life, we think that emails are formal, but for the PMBOK guide and for the PMP exam, informal written emails, memos, online chat, forum discussions are considered as informal written communication. Okay, does that make sense to everybody? That's good. You guys got that one right off the bat. What about formal verbal? Formal verbal. Think about the setting. the specific setting for a formal verbal communication type? Anybody?
Presentations, speeches.
Right, exactly. So if you're in front of an audience and you're giving a speech on a specific topic, whether it's an update on your project or just a speaker in general on a project management topic, that is a formal type of setting. And presentation, speeches, press conferences, hearings, etc., are considered formal verbal. So the only one we have left is your informal verbal, which is all conversations, phone calls, hallway meetings, etc. Are there any questions on any of those?
What if you have a like a group meeting with like 15 other project managers and you're all reporting your project status in a group environment? Is that informal verbal or formal verbal?
Well, it would be considered informal verbal because it is a face-to-face type of thing, all right? And it's not, you would, even though you might be giving an update on a status of your project, it's not a formal report that you're giving, such as a status report or something like the project charter itself. Okay. So, does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think one thing that we wanted to show with this particular matchup here is, if you think back to the previous slide, you know, if you know how to pick up the receiver, you've mastered project communications management, right? How this comes intuitive to us, right? You look at the ones on the left and you can kind of guess which ones they are on the right. Seems easy. Well, that's what project communications as a whole really is. Intuitive and relatively easy, even though it does have a few pitfalls.
Right. And the most important thing to remember in terms of the PMP exam prep questions that you'll have is if you keep in mind that according to the PMI and PMBOK guide, email is considered informal written. Okay, that'll help you with that particular question. And I can almost guarantee that you will have a question specifically about what type of communication that emails are, and they are informal verbal. Okay? So another thing you need to know for the PMP exam is the Project Communications Power Interest Matrix. What this does is it helps you to analyze your stakeholders and develop specific strategies on how to deal with them, all right? The most important thing is this upper quadrant right here. Those particular ones that have the most power, so your y-axis is your potential power, and also the most interest in the project, which is your x-axis. So what you want to do with those individuals, those stakeholders that have the most power and the most interest, you want to keep them satisfied, all right? So they should always be on your radar. These are the people that you want to give daily status reports to or weekly, whatever they decide. But you want to keep them satisfied so they know exactly what's going on with the actual project, okay? If you have someone that has high power but moderate interest or low interest, you want to monitor them. Basically, you want to determine, keep them in the loop, keep them informed of what's going on, but also understand that they might have specific needs, and you might have to communicate that with them more often, the status of your project, okay? They might have power to be able to cancel your project or change the scope of your project, even though they might not necessarily be interested in the daily activities of the project itself. All right?
Yeah, right. And remember, this is only a snapshot, right? You do this at the beginning of the project as you are analyzing your stakeholders, and then, you know, you have that one stakeholder that, you know, high power but very low interest, right? Really not interested in your project at all. Could cancel your project potentially, but, you know, really not interested today. But in 3 months down the road, his or her opinion is suddenly going to change, and your project suddenly becomes the center of the world. You know, now we have high power and high interest. So this is something that you don't only do once, right? This is something that you have to do regularly. You have to look at your stakeholders. You have to think about, you know, where are they now in this whole grid here? You know, they could jump from monitor to manage closely very, very quickly, depending on how their world changes.
Anybody? Come on, Ann. I know you have a question.
Yeah, is it variable depending on the type of organization, who the project manager reports to? Is that situational question? Will they say it's a matrix organization or a hierarchical organization?
Yes.
Yes, they should.
Yeah,
right?
that's a great question. So that was part of our initial framework in our second call when we reviewed that. It's very important to know all the different types of organizations and where the not only the project manager, but the project team members fit in. So know your strong matrix, your weak matrix, your project ties, okay? Know those specifically and where those project managers and team managers fit in. Some of the types of questions that you'll get is you might have a question that says, you are a project manager, you have someone that's working on your team 50%, you are not in charge of yearly evaluations for that particular team member. What type of organization is that? In that type, it would, first of all, it would tell me it's a matrix because it's going to be kind of a hybrid. It won't be a full projectize where you have full responsibility for that performance, but you might have some responsibility for the input of the performance on that particular team member. So then you have to determine if it's a weak matrix or a strong matrix, depending on how much information is given in the question. So very important to know all those. Cornelius?
Yeah, if you look in chapter 1.6 of the PMBOK guide, you will see the role of the project manager. And in the second paragraph, it says, depending on the organizational structure, a project manager may report to a functional manager. In other cases, a project manager may be one of several project managers who a portfolio or program manager. So the PMBOK guide recognizes that project managers do report to varying, organizations within, right?
Okay. Will the project manager ever report to the PMO, or is that?
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Will the project manager ever report to the PMO, Project Management Office? Is that ever?
Here we go. A project manager cannot report to a PMO because you can only report to a person. PMO is an organizational unit. So no, a project manager never reports to a PMO. A project manager may report to the manager of the PMO. Yes. But I'm being extremely picky, but you see where I'm going with this, right?
Yes, that's choice B of, a question.
Exactly. So reports to the PMO or reports to the PMO manager, right? It reports to the PMO manager.
Right.
Yeah.
Good question. So yeah, it's very important to know all the difference between those types of organizations.
Exactly.
Okay.
Any other questions out there?
Have you ever had anybody say they studied too many ITTOs?
Yes. As a matter of fact, me. I studied all the ITTOs. I could give them to you verbatim. I knew exactly which process had which ITTOs and how many and where they went, and it was helpful to a certain extent, but I never used it anymore since then. I've forgotten all about it. But what I should have realized at the time was the way to study ITTOs is sort of a combined study method. You have to know the ITTOs. You have to understand them. You have to know that, when we're talking about a work breakdown structure, the Create WBS process, right? The Human Resources Management Plan is probably nowhere near this thing because we're talking about scope and not about human resources or personnel management. So you have to understand functionality. You have to understand why we're doing things or what we're doing in a process and why we are using a tool or a technique in a certain process, and then it starts to make a lot more sense. Has anybody ever complained that they've really studied too many? No, I don't think so. But I've heard many people say, I shouldn't have learned them by heart. That was useless.
All right, so where we are now is we're going to look at our Take Action worksheet for next week. So what we want to do is take a look at the specific things that we want to do for next week to be prepared for next week's communications management, okay? So let's take a look at that Take Action worksheet. So remember with these, the most important thing to do is to continue to watch the lessons in the PM Prepcast. The PM Prepcast is the bread and butter of this course. That is the material that you need to know, along with the PMBOK guide, to successfully pass the PMP exam, okay? So what we suggest, Cornelius and I, is kind of the top 3 things. But again, it's up to you. You have to determine what's going to do the best, going to be the most beneficial for you in studying. Of course, the first thing that you want to do is read the PMBOK guide, okay, and the exam prep book for the chapter number 10, which is communications management, okay? Also, if you have not actually started your exam application, I highly suggest that you do that, all right? And one of the things you want to do is keep working on that. It's a very tedious process, as we all know. Cornelius and I have been through it ourselves previously. But once you get rolling on that and start contacting those people with your project management experience hours and getting that all together, it really flows pretty well. The hardest part is starting it. So if you haven't started it, please go ahead and do that. Even like I said, if you just put in your name and address, hopefully you're a little further along in the actual process on the exam application at this point than just your name and address. But if you haven't started that, go ahead and do that. And if you have any specific questions on the exam application, put them in the forum. Use that forum, okay? Please make sure that you use that. There are a lot of documents that are included in terms of the Prepcast and the other documentation that Cornelius have provided you. But if you do have specific questions on the exam application, let us know. So it's going to be important to do that also. Okay. In addition to that, there are a couple of things that you can review and also view. And actually, the Project Manager Blues video, I highly recommend that you do that, not as a study, but as a kind of a little levity in your studies to take a break. If you actually have any time that you want to take a break and your brain is just hurting, go ahead and take a look at this because it's pretty entertaining. Okay. And the other thing that we would suggest is to keep going with the answering those sample exam questions. We are in call number 7, okay, so we have 3 left. You, hopefully the majority of you have done a couple, 1 or 2 full 200 question exams with the PM exam simulator. If you haven't gotten to the PM exam simulator yet, I highly suggest that you start doing those. And again, the most important thing is to get into the groove and routine that you want to repeat when you actually sit down for the PMP exam itself. Get into a room by yourself, make sure it's quiet, time yourself, do your brain dumps, do everything to get into a routine for the actual day of the exam. Okay. Cornelius, any additions to that at all?
No, that's the one thing that I would have stressed as well as very important. You, at this point, have to sit down and take as many sample exam questions as possible. This is really the number one thing you have to be working on at this point in your studies. Think of it this way. This is how I always explain it with the Olympic athletes, right? The Olympics are coming up pretty soon in London this year. And don't talk to me about it. I have very bad feelings about it because I cannot go, and I've been looking forward to it. I didn't get any tickets. So if you are an athlete who is going to the Olympics, you will be practicing your sport. Every single day of the week, you will be running the 110-meter hurdles again and again and again and again. And your sport, so to speak, is answering these PMP exam questions, 204 hours. So this is what you want to practice.
Okay, great. So we still have 3 or 4 minutes left. Are there any other questions that you have in general about the material or about the PMP exam prep, or are there any questions from the self-assessment that we didn't go over that you would like to review in the next couple of minutes? Well, I'm going to give it another 5 seconds, and I'm going to assume that everyone is good to go until next week. All right. Well, fantastic, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for call number 7.
We have the quick tip.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I apologize, Cornelius. Okay, Cornelius, take it over. I apologize.
There we go. This is something that you just have to be aware of when it comes to the PMP exam. You will see those questions all over. You know, something is happening. You're responding somehow to this something that is happening. Now, are you performing a contingency or a workaround? Depends very much on the situation. Now, in everyday life, people often use these interchangeably, right? We're planning a workaround if something goes wrong next week, or something's on fire and we're using a contingency to get it fixed, or a workaround. People use them interchangeably. But for the PMP exam, it's very important to know what they really mean. A contingency plan addresses a potential risk. We're sitting down today and we're looking forward. What could happen? If A happens, then we have a contingency plan. If B happens, we have a contingency plan. However, we didn't think of C, and then C actually happened in the future, and we have to respond to this immediately, and then it becomes a workaround, because it is not pre-planned, because it's something that just occurred, we didn't think of it, so it is now a workaround. That's really the big difference between contingency and workaround. You will not get a question on the PMP exam, very likely, that says, please explain the difference between contingency or workaround. But you may get a situational question where there is a situation with people looking forward and what are they creating, and you have to understand that they are creating a contingency plan and not a workaround. So it's more, the questions will be more complicated than just simply explaining the difference, but once you understand the difference, it's really easy to spot and give the correct answer.
So that wraps it up for this week. Thank you, everyone, and we look forward to seeing you again next Wednesday for our call number 8. Thank you so much. Have a great night.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Bye-bye.